Hello and welcome back, everybody. I hope you guys are having a great day. I'm having a great day. Thanks for joining for another episode of Tableau Tip Tuesday, the series where we take a closer look at some of Tableau's functionality. From beginner to expert, this is a great series for you to find some hidden gems to take your visualizations to a new level. Today is going to be part one of our dashboard building techniques little mini series here. Part one is going to cover how to just do a basic build here. So we're trying to tell a story with our data. We're building with layout containers, objects, and deciding whether or not we would like a tiled or floating dashboard. Now, future videos will contain things like adding filters and interactivity to our dashboards, device-specific dashboards, and if we even wanted to see how to post a dashboard and curate that on a server, I've thought about doing a server series as well. All right, so first things first, I have a couple of Tableau Public dashboards that we're going to be going over, and if you weren't already aware, Tableau Public is a fantastic resource for you guys to use as we learn how to build these dashboards. So I have it pulled up on our screen right here, and essentially every single day Tableau gets thousands of visualizations sent to them, and they pick what they deem to be the best one, and they post it to their viz of the day. So it's a great means of you to find some professional quality work, and the nice thing is that it's all open sourced. So you wouldn't really want to have your work data posted to here, because then anybody could come in and download your dashboard, download the workbook, and then they'd be able to take the data that sits behind it. So it's not good for that, but what it is good for is finding something that's perfect and professional quality and then trying to emulate it or reverse engineer it. All right, so that's Tableau Public right here. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the first of our two dashboards here that we're going to be discussing. Before I ever get to the dashboarding phase, I'm always trying to decide what is the message that I'm trying to leave with my end user. So I've kind of overgeneralized it into two buckets here, and I have a dashboard example for each bucket. So the first example that we see right here is nothing more than the correlation of the price of gold versus the price of oil. So essentially this is the first type of the dashboard here where it's just offering one thing. You know, there's not multiple charts here. There's not, interactivity where I click on one thing and another changes. It's just really trying to do a good job of exemplifying one thing very well. Now, we can always go over here and we can, recreate some of these charts. This is what I mean by emulating professional quality work. As we can see right here, this line right here is the same as this line over on the right, the dark gold coloration right there. Now, everything in our being tells us that we should not offer a time series vertically like this. But another reason I like this dashboard is because any best practice, no matter how well defined, can be kind of flipped on its head like you see right here. So he says, I don't care too much about the fact that it's a timeline. I just want to do a really good job at the correlation between the prices as one goes up, what happens to the other, so on and so forth. So through a good use of annotations and spoken English text objects right here, he does a really good job at conveying that message. All right, our next dashboard here is going to be a little bit different. So this is a Beatles analysis here, just the songs that the Beatles wrote that happened to hit the Billboard Top 100. So I like this dashboard because it uses a lot of different chart types, but it puts them together in a meaningful way to tell a story. So we start off with just a stacked bar chart up here indicating the song and the year that it was written. Then just below that, we have where on the Billboard Top 100 it reached. Then down below, which Beatle wrote it, the words and lyrics that went into that, to a scatter plot of how verbose the song is overall, and then if we click on one of these marks, we go all the way down to the row level data. So again, not crazy amounts of interactivity going on right here, but you can see that we kind of stair-step our way through the granularity of our data. So we start off with broad strokes, and then we get very, very detailed information later on in the dashboard. So those are two of the very loose generalizations that I make and the things that I decide when I'm making my dashboard before I push out a finished product. You want to have a good plan of attack going in, otherwise you're just going to wind up with what I call chart soup, where you just have a bunch of valuable and meaningful insights, but they're not organized in a meaningful fashion that tells a story. So remember, we're trying to condense an insight down into its most digestible format, and that's that's the dashboard that we want to offer to our ending user, be that the C-suite, be that a director level, manager level, frontline worker, or if it's more client facing, a customer facing dashboard or something of that nature. So the more planning you can do beforehand, the better off you're going to be, I promise you. All right, so let's go ahead and open up the example that I have built for us here. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our basic build. So if you're like me and you get to this phase and you don't have good sheet titles for your sheet, I do like to point out that in the lower left-hand corner, you can always go to that grid view right here where you can see a thumbnail, so you can just rename directly from here. Another thing I really like to do is this color coordination right here. If you can standardize this color coordination, you can really reacquaint yourself with a dashboard if you come back to it in 3-4 months. So for example, if I multi-select these sheets and make them blue, that can tell me that they're going on the eventual blue dashboard. So if you can get a standardization for that, blue and red go on the blue and red dashboard, yellow is for QA analyzing, brown needs help validating, purple might be an insight that's good but doesn't reach your final dashboard. It's really good to just go ahead and give yourself a trail of breadcrumbs for later on in the future. All right, so back over here, we have 3 basic elements that we can build our dashboard with. So I have a couple of pre-built sheets over here on the left-hand side, and we're just going to try and put them together on this dashboard here. Then in a future video, we'll come back through and we'll add interactivity. So over on the left-hand side, now that I am on a dashboard, you can see that my data and analytics tab have been replaced by my dashboard and layout tabs up here on the top. So just like when we're building our charts, we build with our data pane and we kind of add chart extras using our analytics tab along the top up here. Dashboards are going to follow kind of the same general rule where we build our sheets with our dashboard, and then our layout is for adding extras like borders, backgrounds, padding, transparent layout containers, and things of that nature. So if I toggle back over here to my dashboard tabs, we have 3 general ways to build a dashboard. And I don't want you to look at it like I have to pick one of those 3 ways. Look at it as though your dashboard is probably going to be a healthy mix of all 3 ways. All right, so the first way that we have is just by dragging our sheets right here directly onto our dashboard. So when I drag one on, it will by default take up the entire area that I have given for my dashboard. Now, if we're having trouble getting our published views to look perfect, I can do another video on sizing for different layout containers, different devices. But just go ahead and let me know in the comments if that's something that you would like to see. All right, so when I drop this here, it will by default take up the entire view. It is important to note that this taskbar up here will still work while you're in your dashboard. So if you'd like to make that bigger, you can just by using this sizing up here. We'll go ahead and leave it small because our pie chart is going to be small in the end. All right, you can see that it also came out with its own color legend, size legend, filter shelf. Any interactivity that the chart has is going to come over in its own little designated shelf. Now we can move that by selecting that layout container, and now I can move it using my grip. But let's go ahead and get a general layout for our dashboard before we dive into that here. So now that I have one sheet on my dashboard, each subsequent drag is going to segment that layout container by half, indicating where that sheet will drop. So if I drop this one right here, that's exactly where that sheet will go. It uses the exact same color legend as my pie chart, so it's not going to duplicate it, but rather just use the same one. All right, now each subsequent drag can segment these layout containers in half as well. And if I go down a little bit lower, I can segment both by half. And then if I go lower still, I can actually segment the dashboard in half. So down here, if there was 50 sheets up at the top, those 50 sheets would still just be relegated to half of the dashboard. All right, so it can seem a little bit finicky. As you can see, with just a couple pixels of movement with my mouse, I have, a dozen different drop zones. It can seem finicky at first, but I promise you it's a remarkably intuitive process as soon as you get a little practice under your belt. All right, so we have our general layout here. Let's go ahead and resize these just by clicking on our lines here. We can resize these containers how we see fit. So I'm always looking for ways to get rid of these scroll bars here, just because I find that there can be asynchronous scrolling issues. So if I'm trying to scroll down in this chart versus scroll down in the dashboard, the mouse placement is going to come into play there. All right, so we have our general layout down, and we built all of this just dragging out our sheets from our dashboard pane over here. Well, if we look directly below this, we also have these objects right here. So we can build a dashboard with blank objects. So say, for example, we wanted our own title on this sheet. We could always just take in a text object and place it wherever we would like that title to go. So I'll say sample title here. And we'll go ahead and center that and make it big like a title would be. Press OK. And we can use these text objects if we don't want to use the built-in title that my sheet will come with. All right, so you have a bunch of different objects down here. And just a note here, another great way to build dashboards is just using these blank objects. So I don't even need a single sheet made. If I come on here to a new dashboard tab, you can kind of give people pre-designated drop zones by building with blank objects. Now, when I have someone that may be a little bit more of an analyst that doesn't have design experience, they have pre-designated drop zones that they can drop their sheets in using your work as a template. So another one of my favorite ways to build right there, and you can see that they're not constrained to the template that you give them. They can use it as a guideline and still move it around as they see fit. So you can feel free to have someone that's great at design work, pour hours and hours of work in here getting titles in the appropriate spot. You can use image objects down here to get your company logo on the upper right hand corner. You can really get great looking dashboards, and an added benefit of that is going to be uniformity. So if all of your management department dashboards look exactly the same, people will get very familiar with that quite quickly. So again, that's the last I'll say about that. You don't even need a single sheet made. You can make a template with these objects that you then distribute so that people can leverage your work. Great stuff right there. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll add a dashboard title up along the top. I'll add this right along the top right here. And I'll say, this is my dashboard. There are many like it. This one is mine. Little Full Metal Jacket joke for any fans out there. Make that a little bit bigger, make it a little smaller, and again, we can skinny that up so that we get things represented exactly the way that we would like. So by simply moving things around, hopefully you can organize things in a way that seems meaningful. Remember, we're trying to tell a story with this data. So let's go ahead and take this. Let's move the scatter plot down below where this bar chart is. Generally speaking, scatter plots are very busy. They have a lot of marks on them. So I'm trying to leave that in the bottom of my dashboard, similar to what we saw on that Beatles analysis. So if I want to move any of these charts around, I just select that chart right there, and we get a little grip up along the top, as well as a flyout menu over along the right-hand side. So if you want to get any of your filters, legends, or highlighters back, you can do that using our drop-down. But for now, we're just going to go up along the top where this grip is, and now we can move that sheet around and drop it wherever we see fit. So I'll move that down to here, and then we'll take my sales by market, select the sheet, select the grip, and move it up here along with our pie chart right there. So we can play around with different layout and design elements. All right, so our last method for building these dashboards is below our objects down here. You see we have a toggle for tiled or floating layout containers. I'm not a huge fan of the toggle, but that's only because I'm forgetful and I forget which side it's on. So I prefer the keyboard shortcut, which is just holding Shift. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna take this color legend right here, and we just wanna float it over the chart that it pertains to over here on our pie chart. So we take that grip, and you can see that when I move it, it's tiling, giving me an indicator where it will drop. But if I press Shift, you can see that now toggles over to a floating layout container where we can place it next to the chart that it pertains to. You can do similar things with filters right here. So let's take our market filter, and we're just gonna move it over to the same spot. So I'm gonna hold Shift and then move my grip right here, and we can float this over whatever chart that it pertains to. Now, if it pertains to more than one, perhaps you want it up along the top, so we can press Shift again to tile it down here, up here along the top. So again, make all your cuts. Bear in mind that when you have a floating layout container and you move something else, you can see that that floating layout container stayed put where it was. So just make sure that the floating layout containers, generally speaking, are going to be the last thing that you kind of float where they're supposed to go once everything else is already locked in the place that it's going to live. All right, so I'm not Super happy with how this looks, but again, we're not trying to push through a perfected product here. That can take, hours and hours of work depending on how picture perfect, pixel perfect you want it to be. But let's go ahead and toggle over to our layout container here. So we've been on our dashboard pane right here, and we're going to toggle over to our layout tab up here, where now we can start kind of beautifying this and just adding that little extra spice on top, that little pizzazz to give it that more branded look. So a lot of the options in here are going to pertain to the positioning, borders, backgrounds, a little background padding, so there's a little bit of white space in between charts. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and select the layout container that I would like to change, and you can see that it changes based on its XY position, width, and height over here in my layout tab based on which layout container I'm selecting. So I'm going to go ahead, let's add a border on all of them. Let a very thin dark gray border around each of these charts. There we are, looking good. Now, one thing I always like to add is a little bit of padding. So right here, these two black borders are pretty close together. Giving the eye a little bit of white space to kind of transition between charts can be quite helpful. So once again, I will just select that layout container, where here we have outer and inner padding. Now, the difference between these two is not obvious. So if I select outer padding and I increase it, we're going to notice that there's going to be more space between the outer edge where my grip is indicating the layout container, and that inner border right there will increase in size. Whereas my inner padding is going to pertain to where it says sales by segment, so the inside of the chart with the outside of the border will start to increase there. So if I select that chart, select my inner padding, we'll see that space increase as well. So a little bit of white space just to separate views is going to be great. Although, as you can see with my borders now not matching up, you probably want to be fairly precise, which is why they give you an indication for exactly how much padding is involved there. If you would like to have an entirely floating layout container dashboard, that is fine, and you can move your floating layout containers around using my X and Y positioning, as you can see that moving around, as well as my width and height, which will increase both of those. So you can get pixel perfect dashboard, leaving nothing up to chance of where I drop it with my, human hand, which is probably quite clumsy compared to XY coordinates. Alright, that's where we're going to leave it for this video. I have a cleaner version of this dashboard that I pre-prepared for this. This is the one we're going to be working with next time. Next video is going to be going over some of the options that we have up here in this menu, including most importantly some of our dashboard actions where we can guide people through interactively with our dashboard or even a chain of dashboards. Alright, that's it for today. Join us next week for another tip.